Now that we have these values extracted, let's see how we can essentially present and illustrate, like visualize some of these variables. Okay, in order to do that, we can import Seaborn from Python packages. First of all, we want to make sure that this package is installed. So I'm going to run this, and this one says that a NumPy version is required for this version of SciPy, which Seaborn is part of, and I am getting additional warning. Okay, so if that's the case, what you need to do, I'm going to post this data here. You can pause the video and go through this information. First of all, you want to close your Jupyter notebook, including the terminal that's running in the background. So let me search for that. So for instance, if this is your Anaconda, you should close that. And also you need to look for the terminal that's running, something like this. So you need to close both of these. Then you open your terminal program on Mac or Windows, and then type the following command: conda install Seaborn. And then we follow the prompt, and this should help us install the packages. If you're looking for additional documentation for this, you can check the link that's posted. That's seaborn.py data, and it will essentially provide some information about what we're looking for. And you can actually look at the installation for this. Let's see if we can now do this. I'm going to first try to see if I can do it through my notebook. Otherwise, I'm going to go through other methods. So I'm going to say pip install Seaborn. I'm going to let this code run. And then once that's done, I can import to see that there's a process. It's installing. It's successfully installed the latest version of NumPy. I'm going to move that up. And next, I am going to import my package. So I'm going to import my package. Now I don't see any errors. So either follow these prompts or use the code that I posted up here in order to install the package. Once the package is installed, we want to next run a matplotlib inline. So matplotlib is the package, the visualization package. But what happens is that the presentation of matplotlib has been a bit buggy. So we use this code. It's a magical code that helps us render a figure in a notebook. So I'm just going to add that as a comment. So this will help us render the figure in a notebook rather than out of it. Now that we have run this, so let's do a simple visualization. So I'm going to say Seaborn, and I'm going to look for a count plot. So we're using count, right? Let me just go back to the example. We want to illustrate these values, let's say. So we say count plot, and here I'm going to specify the x vector as chas data, and then our data is coming is equal to, let's say, DFP, or it could be data. Let me just see if that would work. Otherwise, I will change it to DFP. And here I'm going to say we imported PLT previously. So we say import from PLT x label. We can add additional labels. Let me just run this code first and see if it works. Unrecognized arguments, render the figure in a notebook. I'm going to move this here. So here we already have our first plot in our notebook. So we haven't assigned any labels yet, but we have two count bars corresponding to 0 and 1 values for chas. So now we can add to this. I'm going to add the labels for both of these. Let's say for x1, we can characterize this as the houses that are close to Charles River, and we can do the same thing for y labels. So I'm just going to say or title. Actually, this one doesn't have a y, so this is just count. but we can actually assign a label to the figure and call this number of houses next to the river, something like this. So let me run this again. Let me go through this error. Label, I think that was called title, in fact. So I have label here and I have title. And if you want to see what are the values that are being accepted here, you can add additional arguments, but I'm just not going to do any of them at the moment. Okay, so here we have our first, again, simple bar chart. We see the values here and the count as represented here. If I wanted to, let's say, show the percentages, I can use this data and then form it into a new variable and then put that variable as an input for this. Okay, that could be done. And also if we were using DFP, we can also do that. It looks like DFP works as well. If you are interested to see more about Seaborn visualization tools and the kind of plots that it will draw for you, you can look at the documentation, Seaborn Applied Data. You go to Gallery and you see that there's quite a bit of different types of plots that we can get out of this with some simple functions. For instance, a scatter plot. If you go to scatter plot is good when we're interested to see if there are, for instance, some correlations among different variables, or if you want to check regression visually. And we can look at the syntax. So it does receive X and Y value, and there's tons of other stuff you can check. Let's say the background we want to clear, the size, the ranking. If you want to change some of these colors, there is a way to be able to do them with additional functions. But again, the simple function you can always use without using too much syntax. Like scatter plot, we're going to use quite a bit, or a histogram. Let's see if we can try to look at all the grams. So we can have marginal histograms, a stack. Again, some of these might be a little too advanced depending on your knowledge of statistics. But again, once we know our variable, we can simply draw any of these diagrams using a very simple format. We just drop our variables in and then we just tell Seaborn what we're trying to draw. Now let me go back to my example. Maybe we can have an example of another kind of plot. We can focus on MED-V column. Here I can say, let me just add some information. We can use Seaborn histoplot, which originally was distoplot or distribution plot, but in the newer version it's now histogram plot. But distoplot still works, but I believe it's going to be discontinued in next version of Seaborn. So let's do one of these. So I can start with distoplot and then we can change it to histoplot. The results are going to be very similar. So say DFP, I'm interested to plot my MED-V column. Here we can also say, because there was some missing values I noticed in our data, we can say drop NA. It's a method that drops, essentially removes all the missing values. I can just add this as a comment. So if I'm running this code, I'm getting some warning that distoplot is going to be discontinued. Change this to histoplot. Still getting an error, but the code runs. Now it says access subplot subject has no attribute drop NA. I assume drop NA has been removed in the newer version, so we can just remove that part. So we get some X and Y label. So Y label is count, and X is going to be our met V variable. So very nicely we can see what we are looking for. If we, similar to what we did above, I can just drop some titles and labels. So I can drop a label for X and also a title for diagram. I say the median price of houses, and distribution plot for MEDV, let's say column. So once I run this, we see that we have that data now in our plot. So it kind of is represented very nicely. Again, if we wanted, for instance, to go back, our data medium value of the houses, we can see the count. Total count was 506. We have the mean, that's around 22. Again, from this, we can quickly see that it looks like the value around 20 is going to be the highest frequency. We have a standard deviation, minimum, and also maximum, which was 50. And this is, again, nice way to visualize our data sets. Like we also talked about, for instance, mean. If I'm changing this to mean, and there's also all kind of other stuff you can run in order to see. And Seaborn is a good package to be able to get a better understanding of the data using, again, a visualization. Okay, so next let's bring down our DFP, or we can call it DFP variable again, and I'm gonna run this. And next I want to see what are the count for CHAS. So we know that most of the values are 0, with some being at 1. And again, we can combine that with the knowledge we had from here. So if, let's say, if I was running this to plot on CHAS, and I can say houses proximity of houses to the river. Let's just change that. So if I'm running this, again, we see that there's now, like, if you look at this, we see that, for instance, histogram doesn't make sense if we are dealing with categorical variables where there's big distance between these two variables. However, if we want to, for instance, specify the number of bars or the reference values and number of values down there, we can easily add them using the documentation that's provided. So if you're interested, feel free to read in Seaborn the kind of visualization you want to use, and you can always add that to your code.